We're gonna make the hard pivot from the G1 to Drake Wuertz, Drake Younger, who returned over the weekend, unmasking himself at GCW's homecoming event. So this obviously spurred on a lot of criticism from people, both the decision to use Drake and also the way in which they used him, where it was a surprise. It was done as like this shocking angle as well. But I think we should at least bring people up to speed that might not be fully aware of this. Always a great time to ever go down the QAnon rabbit hole involving different people in the industry. So Neil did like a pretty good write up of this on the site as well. So he showed up and challenged Otis Cogar for the Ultraviolent Championship, and he did acknowledge this was on the second night, about some of the fans being unhappy about his presence in GCW, and essentially did apologize. He says, somehow at some point I lost my way. I had people like Joey Janela, like Brett Lauderdale reach out to me and say, hey, you're not the guy that I know. That's not the Drake that I know. That's not the loving Drake that everybody was so happy about when he signed a contract. That's not our guy. And I brushed it off. I didn't listen. I had tunnel vision, stuck in my own bubble, associating with topics, loosely or directly, that I had no business or no interest in affiliating with. Wuertz admitted his words and actions had offended people within GCW, and we'll get into the specifics, and the wider independent wrestling audience. He went on to say that he was not seeking special treatment from Game Changer, but wanted the opportunity to prove himself through his work. He says, I've spent the last 5 years proving and showing that I'm not that guy. And all that I'm asking, as I look at some of you in your eyes, is that you give me a chance to prove myself to you. Of course, Wuertz had worked as a WWE referee from 2014 until he was let go in 2021. And it was really during the pandemic that he started to gain a really bad reputation of stories you would hear of him both in the locker room and publicly as well. He became very vocal in his criticism towards masking during the pandemic, a lot of conspiracy-related claims when it came to different QAnon associations that he was cultivating. There was a report about him walking out during a talent meeting when it came to being an inclusive locker room of all people. There was apparently a comment he made about all lives matter when the topic of Black Lives Matter was brought up. You could go through a lot of these things, and it's like it does not paint a great picture of him. And then on top of that, he had run unsuccessfully for the Florida House of Representatives in 2022, and then publicly disavowed QAnon during that campaign. And this being the first time that he's kind of addressed all of this. We'll get to, because Brett Lauderdale did post something tonight in response to all of this, and I want to get some of your thoughts, Way, because this is one of those subjects that come up about people that listen. I had a lot of criticism of this guy and what he did, what he was peddling, the fact that he was, he was looking to, enter like a political field to push like this agenda further in his community. And, it was a lot of things that turned so many people off of this guy. And I think it brings up the question about how the audience is going to respond to this. And there's certainly been a lot of negativity towards this. And it's, against that is other people that are looking at, should someone be just written off completely and not be able to forge a path back towards their industry of choice if they are making the requisite steps to rebuild that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm open to seeing what change he has made. I feel like this is especially like when you're talking about the independent wrestling sort of like world that I guess like GCW happens to be a part of. Even though I wouldn't necessarily say like it's overtly political. I do think there is like a political stance to the branding, like the brand that promotes Effie's Big Gay Brunch, or like a lot of the other collective shows that I feel like is sort of unspoken, and to bring Drake Younger back in, I feel is like a major risk, and it's also a risk that I also think a Brett Lauderdale nor Joey Janela would be taking unless they had appropriate reason to. Like, I at least like have not seen them make those sort of missteps in the past, and therefore I have a bit more faith when it comes to this that they actually see change in him, and I'm curious to see how he's able to exemplify that in the sort of whatever duration of this run will be. I think like this promo was like a good start, for him to like denounce and apologize. But I think it's got to be a lot more, especially like if he's working in the locker room with people that might be suspicious. I'm kind of curious to hear about some of those stories about what he is doing to perhaps earn those people's trust.
Yeah, I look at this on several levels. Number one is that GCW can extend this offer to Drake to bring him in, and those that are going to reject this are fully in the right to do so, especially if you are among the group that would be directly affected by, this guy's actions or who he was targeting specifically. That is absolutely a valid response that you can have. That's like, you don't have a right to be employed by or to be booked by a company. And if there is so much negative publicity, then GCW has to make that decision. At the same time, there are certain actions that I think you will not come back from. But I also I do not like this idea that someone that can, go to such levels as a Drake Younger did, that person is just completely excommunicated, and we are not a society that is willing to ever allow someone to make amends, to better themselves, to learn from that and move on if genuine. And that's a huge if, and the proof will be in what happens from here. This is also not a case where you can look at some stars that have had to leave the industry, and it's the idea of a promoter that, man, we can really make money with this guy. Like, with due respect, Drake Younger is not coming to GCW because GCW sees like a giant money they can make off of him. And I think to give some context here, this was tweeted about 2 hours ago by Brett Lauderdale. He stated, "In the past, Drake Wuertz shared some extreme views. He spread a rhetoric that was offensive to many and in some cases dangerous. What makes him worthy of a second chance? And why does that second chance come in GCW of all places?" He answers, "In March of 2012, this is Brett speaking about himself, I was on the losing end of a brutal addiction to opiates. I was at the end of the road. I was in Miami for Mania Week and I needed help. Only one person reached out his hand to help, and that person was Drake Younger. On that day, March 29th of 2012, he took me to my first of many years of Narcotics Anonymous meetings that put me on my road to recovery. Drake's compassion changed and saved my life. He gave me a second chance. I've been waiting for years to return the favor and give him his second chance." He goes through, and basically he is going through all the complaints that people have, and he's trying to answer them as best he can. And you can take Brett Lauderdale to whatever degree you want. He does add at the end here that Drake told Brett to take proceeds from his pay for this weekend's appearances and asked GCW to make a donation on his behalf in the amount of $250 to Garden State Equality, which is New Jersey's largest LGBTQ plus advocacy group. And he acknowledges this is the first of many actions on the path to proving change. So, like, Brett's stance is that I am trying to pay back somebody that helped me out and is citing that. But it is going to come down to, like, this is, in some ways, it is like your latest example of just like, maybe this guy should have come back in MMA, because he would have been just there would be no apologies necessary, where these kinds of thoughts and things are just broadcast for everybody and just accepted as part of the culture. This is not generally part of the culture in pro wrestling, and I think it is. I think it is fine to have your opinions of this, but I think that there does need to be room for certain levels of empathy when it comes to, various people that can do bad things, that you have to be able to look at, like, do we want to be in a society where you cannot come back from every indiscretion? And people are going to have different opinions about that. And I'm sure there will be people that disagree with my stance on that too.
I find it to be an interesting experiment, at the very least. And again,
it is like,
if a man is trying to redeem himself, he's putting himself in, I would say, some of the more critical, waters, for an audience. And I'm curious to see what he does.
We are wrapping up the summer big on the Post Wrestling Cafe as John Pollock and Neil Flanagan are flying to London, England for live on-the-ground coverage of AEW All in London. Also this month, we conclude our reviews of Dark Side of the Ring and WWE Unreal Season 3, reviews of ROH's Death Before Dishonor and TNA Lockdown. Rewind Away will cover the WWF Aggression album, and Book Club will cover Total Nonstop Agony by Vince Russo. Sign up now at postwrestlingcafe.com.